You know how it goes. You want to get a real handle on something to uh, dig beneath the surface and really understand it, but without feeling like you're just lost in a sea of information.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly what we're doing in this deep dive. And it's especially tailored for you as you're exploring what it really means to, act as philosophers in the world.
Exactly. It's about getting that insightful understanding efficiently, those moments where things just click without all the unnecessary complexity. And today, our exploration takes us to a really unique philosophical landscape, Mexican existentialism.
That's right. We're diving into a philosophical tradition that grapples with those fundamental questions about existence that resonate across cultures, but it does so through the very specific and vibrant lens of Mexican history and culture.
Mm,
We have a fantastic guide for this, the entry on Mexican existentialism from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
mm.
It's incredibly thorough, covers the key figures, the central ideas, even the critical responses.
Yeah, it's a great resource. Think of this as like your curated journey into this really compelling philosophical territory. Our aim is to pull out the most thought-provoking insights, the ideas that truly spark reflection, and see how they might connect with your own path of philosophical inquiry and action.
Absolutely. We're not just, presenting information, we're exploring these ideas together. So let's start by looking at the roots. How did European existentialism, with its focus on our lived experience, even find its way to Mexico?
Well, it started arriving in the late 1930s. What's fascinating is that it found a really receptive audience among young intellectuals who were already drawn to the idea of a philosophy connected to concrete human experience.
So it wasn't just some abstract trend being imported, there was already a local interest ready for it.
Precisely. And a big catalyst was the arrival of Spanish exiles in the early 1940s,
Hmm.
people fleeing the Spanish Civil War.
Hmm.
Thinkers like Jose Gauss and Juan David Garcia Baca, they played a crucial role. They brought with them a deep engagement with thinkers like Heidegger and the French existentialists, Sartre, Merleau-Ponty. And through their lectures, writings, translations, they really prepared the ground for this distinct Mexican interpretation.
Yeah, they weren't just passively receiving these ideas, they were actively interpreting and adapting them. It makes you wonder, when you encounter new philosophical ideas, how do you filter them through your own, experiences and understanding?
That's a key question for anyone trying to engage philosophically, right?
Mm.
And this active interpretation leads us to a really pivotal group.
Yeah.
Is Grupo Hyperion, the Hyperion group, active between 47 and 52.
The Hyperion group sounds intense.
It was named after a Greek titan. Figures like Emilio Uranga, Leopoldo Zea, Jorge Portilla, Luis Fioro, they became the intellectual heart of Mexican existentialism.
Okay, the Hyperion group. What was their central focus?
Their main goal was to apply these existentialist concepts to that which is Mexican lo mexicano, or Mexicanness.
Mm.
This is where the tradition really takes on its unique character. They were trying to understand the fundamental nature of Mexican existence through an existential lens.
So not just summarizing Sartre, but asking, what does it mean to be Mexican at this fundamental existential level?
Exactly. Some in the group even believed existentialism could bring about moral, social, and religious transformations. They saw it, as Leopoldo Zea put it, as the very instrument with which to interpret Mexican reality.
Wow.
It makes you ask yourself, what tools do you think are most effective for understanding and maybe influencing the realities around you?
That's a big question. They clearly saw philosophy as having real-world impact.
Definitely. And Jorge Portilla went even further, suggesting dramatically that Mexicans might even be existentialists from birth because of their history, their struggles, their resilience.
Existentialist from birth, that's quite an image. It suggests this inherent link between existentialism's core ideas and the lived Mexican experience. What strikes you about that idea, that a specific history might predispose a group towards a philosophical outlook?
It really highlights how philosophy and lived reality can be deeply intertwined. And it's crucial, as Luis Fioro pointed out early on, that this Mexican appropriation was deliberately partial.
Partial, how so?
It wasn't about perfectly copying European thought. It was always meant to be tailored to the concrete realities of the Mexican social, cultural, and historical situation.
That makes sense. For philosophy to actually be useful to guide how we act, it needs to connect with our specific context. Okay, so they're taking European ideas, rooting them in the Mexican experience. What were some key concepts that came out of this?
Well, let's start with freedom, circumstance, and responsibility. They're all interconnected. While existentialists generally see freedom as the capacity to choose, Mexican thinkers really emphasize the context of those choices.
Okay, how did they build on that general idea of freedom? What was their specific angle?
They proposed that for Mexicans, freedom is specifically enacted through conscious choices made within the Mexican circumstance. The goal was intellectual liberation from the lingering effects of colonialism.
Ah,
It
right.
wasn't just about choosing anything abstractly, but choosing consciously within and sometimes against a very specific historical backdrop. How does understanding your own historical context inform your sense of freedom?
That's a really important point. It reframes freedom not just individually, but connected to collective history.
Exactly. And they linked freedom directly to commitment and responsibility for that circumstance. Leopoldo Zea said, "Our freedom is expressed in the form in which we assume the inevitable commitment to our circumstance."
Mm.
So freedom isn't just an end in itself, but a way to empower the concrete place of one's circumstance, taking ownership.
That's a powerful shift from purely individual freedom to one with strong social responsibility.
Right. They argued historical oppression had fostered a kind of indecisiveness and unwillingness. So liberation involves actively reclaiming the power to choose and act. Rango talked about dislodging inferior motivations, Portilla about dismantling the perspective of the stranger.
Challenging those limiting perspectives, that seems central to philosophy itself.
It is. Being truly free, for them, meant recognizing oppression and then taking morally determining actions to break free, contributing to the community's well-being.
And circumstance, what exactly did they mean by that? It sounds like more than just surroundings.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Circumstance was comprehensive. Physical environment, yes, but also language, culture, traditions, history, social relationships, the whole habitat that shapes identity.
So this deep, multi-layered context always influencing us.
Exactly. And they heavily drew on Ortega y Gasset's idea, I am myself and my circumstance, and if I don't save it, I don't save myself.
Right, that connection between self and surroundings.
It underscores that bond, the responsibility to understand, advocate for, even save your circumstance. How does that principle resonate with your own connection to the world?
It really hits home, that idea that our well-being is tied to our community and environment.
Absolutely. The Mexican existentialists centered this. Their identity was tied to a circumstance needing to be addressed. True freedom wasn't escaping circumstance, but becoming aware of your place within it and engaging responsibly.
And this unwillingness, desgana, you mentioned, how did that fit in?
They saw Descana not as freedom, but as withdrawal, a refusal to use freedom. True freedom demands willingness to choose and commit. Zia even prioritized responsibility for one's concrete situation over abstract ideals.
So philosophy shouldn't just be abstract, it needs to be grounded in the here and now, the specific Mexican reality. As someone acting philosophically, how do you balance abstract ideas with concrete realities?
That's a crucial balancing act, isn't it? They felt thrown into a specific non-European colonial-shaped world, and their philosophy aimed squarely at that reality.
Okay, freedom, circumstance, responsibility. What's another core concept?
Another really crucial one is accidentality. It refers to how concrete beings exist, lacking what they called substantial consistency.
Substantial consistency. What's that?
It's linked to a sort of Eurocentric ideal of a human untouched by history or circumstance, a universal, abstract human.
So being accidental means falling short of this abstract ideal.
Exactly. It implies being insufficient, dependent, shaped by messy reality. Uranga described the accident as inherently fragile, always threatened because it depends on this idealized substance. Does that idea of inherent fragility resonate with you?
It certainly speaks to a vulnerability that feels like a basic part of being human.
Right. They saw recognizing life as revocable, finite, precarious as central to the Mexican experience. Uranga even rejected traditional substance metaphysics for metaphysics of the accident, where individual life is indeterminate, abandoned onto its context.
A metaphysics of the accident, embracing the lack of stability as core to being, that's a big shift.
It is. He argued that even our connections to seemingly stable substances, beliefs, structures, are ultimately fragile, revealing our temporality, our accidentality.
And substantialization. That sounds like the opposite.
Exactly. It's the illusory belief in a stable, determined, self-sufficient identity. Uranga saw it as blocking Mexican liberation, calling it inhuman because it falsely divides people into substance and accident.
So chasing the stable, perfect self is seen as a delusion, denying our actual condition.
That's the core idea. Liberation comes from recognizing and accepting our accidentality, which leads to insufficiencia, or insufficiency.
Insufficiency sounds negative.
It can, yeah. But here it's the ontological counterpart to the psychological inferiority complex. Samuel Ramos had talked about inferiority in Mexicans, but Uranga said that's just a symptom of a deeper human condition. Our accidentality felt as insufficiency.
So not just a Mexican trait, but maybe universal.
That's the claim. And here's the twist.
Yeah.
They argued recognizing this insufficiency can actually be empowering.
Empowering.
They believed it brings us closer to an authentic understanding of being human, more liberating than chasing unattainable substantiality. How might embracing perceived shortcomings, rather than striving for an ideal, affect your own philosophical growth?
That's a really interesting flip. Vulnerabilities as a source of strength. Now, let's move to another evocative concept, Nepantla.
Nepantla. Yeah, the word itself is fascinating.
It is. Tell us more.
It's nahuatl, meaning in between. Mexican existentialism reappropriated it as a key ontological category. It's used in Latinx scholarship now too, but its roots in the Nahuatl experience of colonization are key here.
In between, what does that mean philosophically?
Several things. One, suspension between commitments or worlds, reflecting that indeterminacy we talked about. Two, the feeling of always being on the way, displacement, like never again, never yet. Does that feeling of transition resonate with navigating different ideas?
Absolutely. That liminal space is familiar when synthesizing viewpoints.
Exactly. Three, Nepantla can be an existential refusal to commit to oppressive situations, a strategic neutrality. And finally, just being in the middle of times, worlds, crises, always in transit.
So it's this complex idea of existing in a liminal space, culturally, politically, ontologically.
Precisely. And Uranga, though he only mentioned it briefly, saw Nepantla as the central concept. He argued the Mexican character resists neat categories existing in this perpetual between. He stressed its indigenous origins, not borrowed from the West. What are your thoughts on drawing philosophy from indigenous concepts?
Seems incredibly valuable for enriching philosophy, offering perspectives missed by purely Western traditions.
It is. By prioritizing indeterminateness, it challenges Western philosophy's focus on fixed categories. And strategically, defining oneself as Nepantla can resist rigid objectifications.
So it's like saying, I don't fit your boxes, and finding power in that ambiguity.
Exactly. And this in-between state often has an emotional counterpart, zozobra.
Zozobra, tell us about that.
Uranga called zozobra the emotive expression of Nepantla. It's that pervasive feeling of uncertainty, unease, anxiety, even despair. He got the term from the poet Ramon Lopez Velarde.
So it's the lived feeling of being in that Nepantla space?
Exactly. Feeling overwhelmed by possibilities, none seeming valuable or trustworthy. A paralysis of choice. Uranga described it as oscillating between options without a clear reason, like standing on quicksand. When you hit uncertainty in your own explorations, what emotions come up?
That feeling of being overwhelmed without a clear path forward.
Yeah, that's familiar with complex philosophical questions.
It's very human. Mexican existentialism suggests zozobra reflects the unsettled, accidental nature of Mexican identity, but also the freedom in that indeterminacy, though it often feels more like unease than liberation.
Okay, we've covered some heavy concepts. Let's shift a bit to relajo and apartados. These sound like they offer a different take on engaging with the world. They do. Relajo is central to Jorge Portilla's philosophy. Broadly, it's behavior that deliberately undermines expected attitudes toward established values, norms, aesthetics, laws. Portilla called it a suspension of seriousness, playfully saying no to social demands.
A suspension of seriousness. I think we can all relate to wanting that sometimes.
Definitely. Usually we uphold values appropriately. Relajo is a non-standard response, rejecting those demands. Portilla saw three movements: displacing attention from the value, dissolving the person-value relationship, a lack of solidarity, and a disruptive gesture inviting others into this lack of seriousness.
So it's social, not just individual defiance.
Exactly. It shows the need for others, the I-you relationship. Relajo is hard to do alone. People who habitually do this are relajientos.
Relajientos. What defines them?
Fundamentally unserious, seizing chances to suspend seriousness, adept at minor chaos, diverting attention, inviting others to join, lackadaisical, disdainful of rules, authority, customs, living in the present, no regard for past or future. Portilla even said, a relajiento is an individual without a future, refusing commitments. Have you met people like this?
I think we've all seen people inject playful chaos into serious situations.
Probably. Now, the complete opposite are the apartayos. Loosely, uptight, buttoned up, even fanatical. Not just serious, but burdened by seriousness. zealous, unwavering in beliefs, often rigid.
The intense rule follower, deeply committed type.
Exactly. For the Apartado, there's no distance between being and value. They are what they value. They prioritize order, obedience, adherence over freedom or flexibility. Portilla called them compact masses of value.
So Thoreau Hinto rejects seriousness. The Apartado embodies it. Did Portilla see a middle ground?
He did. A desirable middle ground. Respecting values and rules, but willing to critically question, using irony and humor not just to disrupt, but for deeper understanding. Identifying with values without being consumed by them, avoiding Relatiento nihilism and Apartado fanaticism. Does that idea of balance, commitment, plus critical reflection inform your approach?
That balance seems crucial for thoughtful engagement, acting ethically without being dogmatic. Now, let's turn to death, a frequent topic in existentialism. What's the Mexican existentialist view?
Emilio Ranga contrasted the Mexican view with the Anglo-American one. In Anglo-American cultures, death is often terrifying loss, resisted because it takes everything. The Mexican view often holds death takes nothing, because nothing was truly possessed absolutely. So death isn't intensely feared or avoided, it's accepted as an unavoidable fact of life.
That's fundamentally different. Focus shifts from loss to acceptance of a natural cycle.
Exactly. Octavio Paz explored this too, contrasting the future-oriented instrumental view of death in the West, mortality as motivator, with the past-oriented historical view in Mexico, death as always already present.
So, not something distant driving you, but coexisting with life now.
Precisely. Uranga said, death is the only thing that the Mexican does not leave for tomorrow, suggesting being with death, not being toward death driven by fear. The belief that death wants nothing essential diminishes fear, leading to coexistence, acceptance. How does this compare to your own view or background?
It's much more integrated, less fear-driven than often found in the West. Now, the source also mentions some minor themes. Can you touch on those briefly?
Sure. Irony was seen by Portilla and Rosario Castellanos as liberating. Castellanos saw it questioning dogmatic values. Portilla saw it as a middle ground between relajo and apartado, allowing critical engagement without destruction.
So irony is a nuanced tool for thought, navigating extremes.
Exactly. Another is charity, especially in Antonio Casso's Christian existentialism. He contrasted egoistic existence as economy with irrational acts of disinterest and charity self-sacrifice for others. He argued authentic life is lived in service, and charity, being free and irrational, defines true goodness.
Charity as transcending self-centeredness.
Precisely. And finally, fragility, melancholy, and unwillingness. Fragility is the threat of non-being. In Mexicans, it manifests as melancholy, groundlessness, and unwillingness, desgana, a refusal to act not from lack of will, but from sensing the world's abjectness, a passive resistance, but it limits historical impact.
A passive resistance from sensing the world's brokenness, but maybe self-limiting. Okay, we've covered a lot. But this wasn't universally accepted, right? There were critiques.
Oh, absolutely. Many critiques. Methodological ones, like Jose Gauss questioning if a single Mexican being even exists to philosophize about. Others, like Villegas, worried about blurring history and ontology.
So some doubted the basic premise of a distinct Mexican essence, or found the methodology lacking.
Exactly. Also more dismissive critiques. Jose Vasconcelos thought it was sterile, inspiring unwillingness, not the commitment it claimed to value.
So some felt it was intellectually weak and maybe counterproductive?
Right, and significant political critiques, too. Roger Bartra argued it came from dominant class disdain and justified inequality. Ana Santos Ruiz saw it as state ideology, essentializing Mexican identity, erasing differences.
Those are serious charges, philosophy having unintended negative consequences. It highlights the need to critically examine ideas beyond just theory.
Indeed. It's a reminder of the complex interplay between ideas and their social, political contexts.
It's fascinating how these ideas were developed and challenged. What about now? Is Mexican existentialism still studied?
Yes, it's actually having a resurgence. In Mexico and the U.S., figures like Guillermo Hurtado and Carlos Alberto Sanchez are key. Editing, translating, reinterpreting foundational texts. There's renewed engagement, applying these ideas to decolonial thought, literary analysis, ethics.
So not just history, but a living tradition offering insights today.
Precisely. Scholars are finding new ways to use these unique insights for 21st century challenges.
This has been a really illuminating deep dive. To wrap up, what are one or two key takeaways for someone interested in acting as a philosopher?
I think the strong emphasis on circumstance and freedom is key. Mexican existentialists remind us philosophy and action aren't in a vacuum. They're shaped by our specific historical, cultural, social context. Awareness of this context is essential for meaningful engagement.
That's powerful. Grounding our thinking in concrete realities, not just abstract thought.
And also the perspective from accidentality in Nepantla. Recognizing our lack of absolute grounding, our in-betweenness, can help us see identity as fluid, contingent, evolving. This can foster empathy, openness crucial for engaging philosophically with the complex world.
So embracing uncertainty and fluidity can be a source of strength. That's interesting. Could embracing our own accidentality or lack of ultimate grounding actually be liberating, a source of connection, not anxiety? And what might a philosophy rooted in your own circumstance reveal?
These are exactly the kinds of deep questions Mexican existentialism prompts.
Yeah.
I definitely encourage listeners to delve deeper. That Stanford Encyclopedia entry is a great starting point.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for taking this deep dive with us. We really hope it's given you valuable, thought-provoking insights for your own philosophical journey and acting as a philosopher in the world.